Every single time you feel that thump on your line, your hands betray you before your brain even catches up. Curious, that instant jerk, that reflexive yank upward, feels like the right move because every cell in your body screams, "Do it now." I am telling you right now that exact reaction is the reason you are losing most of your fish. My name is Artie Boone, and I have spent 25 years guiding anglers on water across this country from dawn until dark. I build custom crankbaits in my shop that tournament champions quietly slip into their tackle boxes before big events every season. Thoughtful. I have watched over 10,000 hooksets from the passenger seat of my boat, and I have seen the pattern clearly. 9 out of 10 anglers, from beginners to guys with 30 years of experience, make the same critical error at the strike. And the worst part is that nobody talks about it because it feels so natural that nobody thinks to question it. Let me take you back to a tournament on Lake Guntersville, Alabama, middle of October, water temperature sitting right around 62 degrees. I was targeting largemouth bass along a submerged grass line that was absolutely loaded with fish holding tight to structure. First cast of the morning, I felt a solid thump that traveled straight up the rod and into my wrist like electricity. I ripped that rod back so hard and so fast that my reel handle smacked against my forearm and left a bruise. The hook came back with nothing on it except a tiny shred of lip tissue hanging off the barb point. That happened again on my second fish, and then again on my fourth, and then again on my fifth contact of the day. I finished that tournament dead last with 5 distinct bites and exactly 0 fish weighed in at the scales. 5 opportunities handed to me by the lake, and my own hands threw every single one of them away completely. Now here is the part that kept me awake for weeks after that tournament ended, and I drove home empty. The angler fishing the adjacent stretch of that same grass line, same depth, same bait profile, landed 5 fish out of 5 bites. I watched him do it from 40 yards away, and something about his timing looked wrong to me at first glance. He seemed slow, almost lazy, like he was half asleep out there and did not care about the fish at all. After the weigh-in, I walked up to him and asked what he was doing differently because I needed to understand the gap. He looked at me like I had asked him why water is wet and said one sentence that changed my fishing forever. He said I just count to 3 before I do anything, and then he walked away carrying his trophy toward the truck. I thought he was messing with me at first because that advice sounded too simple to be the real answer, honestly. But that guy won the tournament, and I was loading my boat onto the trailer with nothing but a bruised forearm and wounded pride. So I went home and started thinking about what actually happens beneath the surface when a fish contacts your bait in real time. I build lures for a living, which means I spend hundreds of hours studying how fish interact with artificial presentations underwater. Here is what most anglers never consider because they have never watched it happen from the fish's perspective below. A bass does not inhale your crankbait and immediately swim away with it locked in the back of its throat perfectly. It grabs the bait with the front of its mouth first, clamps down to test it, and then repositions it deeper. That entire process takes between 1 and 3 seconds, depending on the size of the fish and the water temperature. When you set the hook the instant you feel contact, you are pulling your bait out of the fish's lips before the hook point reaches hard tissue. Think about it from a pure mechanical standpoint, like an engineer would analyze a connection point under stress. The hook needs to rotate inside the mouth and find purchase in the corner of the jaw or the bony plate. That rotation requires the fish to close its mouth fully and create the pressure that drives the point into solid structure. A bass takes roughly 2 to 3 seconds to complete that cycle from initial grab to full commitment on the bait. Walleye are even slower because they have that famously soft bite, and they hold a bait up to 4 seconds before committing. Pike are the paradox that surprises everyone because they attack like a freight train, but grab prey sideways and rotate it head first. Even trout, the fastest processors on this list, need at least 1 full second to transition from grab to swallow. Now I want to share something with you that I have never put in a video before, and it is hard data. For 15 years, I have kept a leather journal in my boat where I log every single client hookset I witness on guided trips. I record whether they set immediately or waited, what species they were targeting, and whether the fish stayed connected. The clients who yanked the rod the instant they felt a bite landed their fish roughly 35% of the time overall. The clients I coached into waiting just 2 to 3 seconds before setting landed their fish between 70 and 85% consistently. That is not a marginal improvement, and it is not a rounding error or a lucky season on one particular lake somewhere. That is thousands of hook sets across 15 years, multiple states, a dozen species, and every style of fishing I guide for. The title of this video says double your catch, and my journal says that is actually a conservative promise based on reality. Your brain is not wired for patience in that moment, and I want you to understand exactly why so you stop blaming yourself. When you feel a strike, your adrenal glands dump cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream within a fraction of 1 second flat. That chemical cocktail triggers your fight-or-flight response, which is an ancient survival mechanism designed for escaping predators quickly. Your muscles contract, your grip tightens, and your arms fire upward before your conscious mind even registers what happened down there. It is the same reason a new driver slams the brakes and locks the wheels instead of applying smooth, progressive pressure. An experienced driver overrides that panic response with trained muscle memory that produces a better outcome every single time. The good news is that you can train this override for fishing just like you trained it for driving years ago. Be honest with yourself right now. How many times have you set the hook so hard that your bait launched over your head into a tree behind you? If any of this is clicking for you and changing how you think about what happens at the strike, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you catch the next video where I go even deeper on technique and mechanics. I put out new content every week built on the same kind of real-world data and guide experience you are hearing right now. This is not theory from a textbook or something I read on a forum and decided to repeat without testing it personally first. Every single thing I teach comes from that leather journal and 25 years of watching what actually works on the water consistently. Now you understand why you need to wait, and that knowledge alone puts you ahead of most anglers fishing today, honestly. But knowing that you should pause is only half of the equation, and the other half is the one that actually matters most. Because there is a right way to wait during those 3 seconds, and there is a wrong way that will cost you even more fish. Here is what I need you to understand before we move into the exact step-by-step protocol for executing this technique properly. The pause itself, without the correct rod position and body mechanics during those 3 seconds, can actually be worse than the instant hook set. I have seen anglers who heard about waiting but kept their rod tip high and their line tight during the pause and still lost everything. There is a specific sequence I developed and refined across hundreds of guided clients that covers what your hands, your rod, and your line do during the count. One element of that sequence contradicts virtually everything you have seen in other fishing videos about proper hook set form and technique. I tested it, I tracked it, and the numbers in my journal do not lie about what produces results and what does not. When I show this to experienced anglers on my boat for the first time, the reaction is always the same disbelief and resistance. And that is exactly where we are headed next, because this is the part where most people look at me and say, "Artie, you cannot be serious." So let me walk you through exactly what your hands and your rod need to do when that bite comes through the line. The very first thing, and I mean the absolute first motion your body makes, goes against everything you feel inside your chest. You drop the rod tip down toward the water instead of lifting it, and you might even feed a few inches of slack forward. I know that sounds like handing the fish a free escape route, but the physics tell a completely different story here, honestly. When your line stays tight during that initial contact, the fish feels resistance pressing against the inside of its lips immediately. That pressure is a warning signal, and the fish opens its mouth to reject the foreign object faster than you can blink twice. I have spent hundreds of hours watching underwater camera footage while testing my own crankbait prototypes in clear water tanks at my shop. I have seen base open wide, pull my lure in, feel that tight line, and spit it out in less than 1 second flat. Every instinct in your body screams to pull up because your muscles are already firing before your brain finishes processing the signal. You need to do the exact opposite, and I need you to burn that sentence into your memory like a brand on leather right now. When you drop that rod tip and introduce slack, the fish feels zero resistance and its confidence goes through the roof immediately. It closes its mouth fully, repositions the bait deeper, and the hook point rotates into the hard, bony corner of the jaw naturally. I have built over 300 custom crankbaits, and I can tell you the hook does its own work if you just give it room. The engineering is already in the design of the hook gap, the point angle, and the barb geometry that took decades to develop. Your job in that moment is to stop being a participant and start being a spectator for exactly 3 seconds of your life. Think of it like holding a door open for someone instead of shoving them through it with both hands on their back. Now here is where the mental game either saves you or destroys you, because your brain is a filthy liar under adrenaline pressure. The counting method matters more than most people realize, and I learned this the hard way by timing my clients with a stopwatch. You say the words 1001, 1002, 1003 inside your head during those seconds of waiting patiently. Do not just count 1, 2, 3, because under that adrenaline dump, your internal clock compresses like an accordion getting squeezed shut. I started clipping a little digital stopwatch to my console and pressing it the moment a client felt a bite on the line. They would set the hook, and I would check the elapsed time and show them the screen without saying a single word. Guys who swore on their mother's grave they waited 3 full seconds consistently clocked in at 1.2 seconds on average. The elongated phrasing of 1,000 forces your mouth and brain to slow down enough to match actual real-world time. After those 3 seconds pass and you have counted properly with slack in your line, it is time to set that hook for real. But you are not yanking that rod straight up toward the sky like you are trying to ring a church bell with the tip of it. You sweep the rod to the side with a smooth, firm motion that comes from rotating your waist, not snapping your wrists upward. A lateral hook set pulls that hook point directly into the corner of the fish's mouth where the tissue is dense and tough. A vertical hook set drags the point upward across the soft palate where it slices through like a knife through warm butter easily. The difference between a fish that stays buttoned and a fish that throws the hook mid-fight is about 30 degrees of angle. Keep your elbows tucked close to your body and use your core to generate the power like you are throwing a controlled punch. I tell my clients to imagine they are closing a heavy sliding barn door with one arm, smooth and strong and completely horizontal. But here is where I need to be straight with you, because I would be lying if I said this works perfectly every single time. There are specific situations where that 3-second pause will actually cost you more fish than the instant hook set ever did, honestly. Topwater fishing is the big one, because when a base explodes on a walking bait, the fish turns and runs the instant it grabs. You wait 3 seconds on a topwater strike, and that fish has already opened its mouth, and your bait is floating there empty. Finesse fishing with micro jigs and tiny hooks is another exception, because those small profiles get ejected incredibly fast by fish. Shorten your pause to about 1 or maybe 1.5 seconds maximum when you are throwing anything on a size 8 hook or smaller. Heavy cover situations near laydowns, cypress knees, and boat docks demand a faster response because the fish will bury you in structure. Anyone who tells you that one single trick works universally in every situation has either never fished seriously or is selling you something worthless. Let me tell you how the 3-second rule adapts depending on what gear you have in your hands out there on the water. Spinning rod with a jig-bouncing bottom. You shorten the pause to about 2 seconds because ground contact compresses the fish's decision window. Baitcaster with a Texas rig flipping into grass. That is the classic full 3-second scenario. This entire technique was originally built around. Carolina rig gets even more time, 3 to 4 seconds, because the fish picks up that trailing bait and moves before feeling any weight. Bobber fishing has its own beautiful built-in timer that most people completely ignore when they are watching that red and white plastic bob. Do not set the hook when the bobber first dips, because that is just the fish mouthing the bait and testing it carefully. Wait until that bobber slides completely under the surface or starts tracking sideways through the water with clear purpose and direction. One principle drives all 4 versions, and that principle is giving the fish enough time to commit before you commit back to it. I want to tell you about a guided trip last spring that proved this concept more powerfully than any data in my journal ever could. I had a father and his 14-year-old son on my boat, and the dad had been fishing for over 30 years consistently. I taught them both the exact same protocol: rod tip down, slow count, lateral sweep, everything identical between the two of them. The dad nodded along and said he understood completely, but when that first bite came, his arms fired upward like bottle rockets on autopilot. He went 2 for 11 that day, and every missed fish followed the same pattern of instant reaction, overriding conscious intention completely. His son had never developed that muscle memory, so when I said count to 3, he just counted to 3 calmly. That kid went 9 for 12, and somewhere around fish number 7, the dad looked at me with genuine confusion on his face. He said, "How is my 14-year-old son out fishing me?" And I said, "Because he is doing what I taught him, and you are doing what 30 years of habit taught you instead. You can build this skill before you ever touch the water again, and I want you to actually do this, not just hear it. Grab a rod, tie on a 2-ounce sinker, and go stand in your backyard or your garage or your driveway this weekend honestly. Have your kid or your buddy stand 20 feet away holding the line and give it random tugs while you practice the full sequence. Rod tip down, 1001, 1002, 1003, lateral sweep, and repeat it until your hands stop arguing with your brain. 50 repetitions is the number where I see the switch flip in my clients from conscious effort to automatic trained response on the water. I still run 20 or 30 reps myself in my yard before every tournament season starts, and I have been doing this for decades now. If I still need to practice it after 25 years of guiding, you definitely do too. And that is not an insult at all. 5 minutes in your yard with a sinker is worth more than $500 of new gear sitting in a box on your truck seat. I want to hear from you in the comments if you have tried this technique already, because the messages I get from this community genuinely blow me away. One viewer wrote me last month and said he applied the 3-second rule on his very next trip and caught more fish that day alone than his previous 3 outings combined together. Your results are not just comments to me, they are proof that this works in hands other than mine across water I have never even fished. Think about the 3-second rule the same way a competitive shooter thinks about breathing before squeezing the trigger on the firing line. The best marksmen in the world do not fire on the inhale when their chest is tight and their pulse is pounding hard. They exhale slowly, find the stillness between heartbeats, and press the trigger in that calm, quiet space between breaths. Next time you feel that thump travel up your rod, just breathe out and count, because 3 seconds and 1 exhale will change everything. Hit subscribe and drop a like if this changed how you think about hook sets, and I will see you next week when I show you why 80% of anglers hold their rod wrong and how it kills your sensitivity before you ever feel the bite.